Welcome back to Touch and Base Podcast. It is Mariner Mondays. Once again, we got a full crew, set of 4 people on the channel. We're going to be talking ball. A lot of updates since the last time I had anybody recording in here. We have some good news, we have some bad news, and then I have some troubling news that could be really good for the Pacific Northwest or could be really bad specifically for Seattle. So, let's get into this. Boys, we got Jay Trident. We have Jake from Raise the Trident. Don't get those two mixed up. And then we have Colby Patnode from Locked On Mariners, along with we have like 16 other podcasts going on. So you could probably find him down in the links in the description below. Boys, we have George Kirby news. Not good. Not good. As far as what I was able to find, it's in-depth information, not too crazy because it's so recent, but he's not going to be starting opening day. He's not going to be starting in the first month from what it seems. They said it's not going to be day to day. It's going to be week to week thing as far as observing his shoulder inflammation. I have an inflamed lower back right now severely, and I can barely walk. So this worries me. Are we sweating or are we not sweating?
Yeah,
Anybody?
I feel like when it comes to pitchers, you're always gonna be concerned when it's anything related to the arm in any way, shape, or form. So, I'm not concerned, or at least I don't think we're gonna see like the next notification about Kirby being like he's out for the season, he needs surgery type thing. However, it just kind of sets up, you're going to be looking at him a lot closer for at least the first few months he's back too. And it feels like any sign of him, struggling, people are going to be like, oh gosh, is the shoulder popping back up? Is this going to become more than it is? When Hollander was doing his interview thing, I heard Divish say that like he's dealt with this before. This is not, I'm pretty sure Kirby's had this like shoulder issue beforehand one time. So it helps me a little bit knowing that like he's been through it before. So it's probably just a thing where he just needs to like stop throwing for a little bit, get shut down, and then ramp back up later on. So you're always going to be concerned when it's an arm, shoulder, elbow. It doesn't really matter. You're going to be like, the stomach's going to drop a little bit. But overall, if I would be surprised if this turned into kind of like a season long thing. So at least that's the hope for me.
It's not an elbow, right? So I mean that makes everybody feel a little bit better. I mean, that's if
Sure.
someone said elbow inflammation, I'd probably
Yeah,
start
that's a
worrying.
tricky one because elbow injuries, even like the worst one, right? Tommy John, at least you're back in a year or so. Shoulder
Mhm.
stuff, it might
Can
like,
linger.
yeah, it can linger and it can end your career. Like Tommy John used to end people's career, not so much anymore, but there are, I think it's a thoracic outlet syndrome, I think is what it's called. It can ruin your shoulder. Danny Holtz's career was ruined by it. Shoulders are scary when we're talking long term. I don't know if there are any scarier because typically you hear elbow tenderness or anything like that. You jump to DEFCON 1 pretty fast because those
Hmm.
very quickly turn into UCLs. And
It used to be Tommy, like not Tommy John, but it used to be like, oh, tennis elbow or whatever,
yeah,
and
yeah.
now
So
it's Tommy John.
yeah, the elbow is not as scary as it was, even 20 years ago in terms of just long-term health and all that stuff. Shoulder stuff
Hmm.
I get a little freaked out by because not only does that kind of tend to linger a little bit, but it also kind of tends to uh, be a recurring type of problem. And the surgeries there do not have nearly the same success rate as elbow surgeries do. But we shouldn't jump to that conclusion that Kirby definitely needs a shoulder surgery or anything like that. Hollander was, you know, optimistic. At least he was publicly putting out an optimistic statement on Kirby,
When
and he'll
haven't
get.
they?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like Jake said, until you see him out there and until you see him kind of throw for a little while, and you just kind of like build up this like, okay, he's okay. Like it's kind of like Woo in the second half last year, where it's just like, yeah, this is great. Is he going to get hurt? Is he going to get hurt, or is it? And then he was fine for a month, and you're just like, okay, he's good. And I think you're just going to have to deal with that with Kirby. But yeah, at least publicly, the Mariners seem very unbothered. But they were unbothered with like Gregory Santos last spring, and he threw like 8 innings for you. So
Yeah.
we'll see. But so I would say I am mildly concerned right now. And then obviously, the longer it takes for him to get back on the mound, the more the concern builds. But because it's a shoulder in particular, yeah, I'm a little bit on edge about his long term until he actually pitches.
Well, the way he said it, I mean, you see it on the screen. It's like someone who's acting like they're a doctor explain to a patient that they have cancer, but they don't really know what cancer is. Like he says, I mean, a quote, "We'll shut George down and work on getting the inflammation out." Like inflammation is scar tissue or some sort of abrasion or bone spur or something like that. It's like it's a swollen like muscle or tendon in that arm. It's like it doesn't. I'm not. It just worries me because the verbiage of what he said doesn't sound like he knows or understands what like what is going on in the shoulder at all. But I again, he's so Kirby to me always seems like a 23-year-old or 21-year-old, like a young pitcher, and I'm pretty sure he's 27, right? Is he
Uh,
27 years old now?
College guy, college draftee. So yeah, 26, 27. This is third
27.
full
There it
year.
is.
Yeah.
Kirby 27. So I'm 30 and I'm dealing with a back issue right now. I never thought I would have this kind of pain, and it's just inflammation that pinched a nerve. Nobody cares. The long story short, inflammation can do a lot to you, and especially if you start getting closer to 30. And so what you're saying, shoulders, you're not exactly sure. It's not like a common thing that people have a quick fix for. You at least know a timeline. This could flare up at any moment. That does worry me, at least at this point. But I do like the optimism that, maybe it's not something we're going to have to worry about too much as far as his overall health. But I think the biggest concern would be the rotation now, because last Mariner Monday that I had with Ty, like, if anybody gets hurt, we have nobody to back up, and now we're already starting to see the worst nightmare come to life. But Jay, I wanted to get your opinion on this.
Yeah, I pretty much just echo everything, Jake and Colby said. It's just, and these things happen, and then it's like, oh, late April, he's going to start throwing. Then that gets pushed back 2 weeks. And then it's like, oh, it's a little sore. So now it's going to be late May. And then, oh, he'll start a rehab assignment in mid-June. It just always seems to get pushed back with these things. So in terms of like 2025, I'd be lying if I wasn't a little concerned. I mean, I'll be honest, my brain just always goes to when I hear shoulder or elbow, like, with Wu last year when it was, I forgot what his was in spring, but it was, oh, we won't see him. Brash, obviously I was elbow, but it's like, oh, he's doesn't need surgery. And then it's like starts throwing and it's like, oh, then ends up needing the surgery. So it's hard not to think like kind of the worst a little bit with these things, but it's also like until we just know more, I can't really I just have to assume what they say is correct. And hopefully it's, 3-4 weeks a month. And maybe by May, Kirby's back in there. And I think the rotation can be fine. You don't need like an Emerson Hancock, whoever it is, to be perfect. Just get the results somehow, kind of like he did a little bit last April. It wasn't pretty, but, outside of that Milwaukee game, it was okay. So, I mean, if he can hold that down for a month, I think the team will be fine. It's just if it lingers and goes on, that could be an issue. And that's my concern, obviously.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to put in too, like, we also have to understand, with at least with the Mariners and how they've treated, the pitching staff the last few years. I mean, they've been pretty cautious, it feels like, and that's led to them being one of the more healthy pitching staffs in the game. I mean, obviously, Brash went down last year and Santos and all that jazz, but when we're talking like the rotation, at least, I mean, they've been pretty lucky to be as healthy as they've been. So I trust the Mariners organization and their training staff to be making the right calls to keep these guys as healthy as they can be, to get as many starts as we can in 2025 from the guys who should be getting the starts. And with that said too, like, you look at the tone that Hollander had within his press conference. I mean, yeah, he seemed pretty optimistic and felt like he was just kind of like trying to be like, hey, this is not actually like a big deal, or we don't think it's going to be this a big deal going forward. This is more of a precautionary thing that we're doing than a totally necessary thing. So with that, I'm there's always going to be the concern there, but I trust the Mariners training staff. That's one of the main things I feel like you can trust with the Mariners organization, is that they are going, their training staff keeps guys healthy fairly well for all things considered.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also important to note that they already did the MRI. There was no structural damage. They didn't find anything. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, like if this happened to somebody else, like, I don't know, Kevin Gossman or whatever, we'd be like, okay, well, maybe he misses a couple weeks. But because it's happening to your team, it's like, the 5-alarm fire, and everyone's like, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? Because it feels like it's only happening to your team. But like Yankees are overreacting because their guys is, got elbow stuff, and he had an MRI and he's not feeling great. Like, he's saying these things. And when George talked about it, he did mention that like the velocity is fine. Like, the velocity has been fine this spring. It's just that it's taking him a little bit of extra time to kind of bounce back after he throws. So there's a lot of little breadcrumbs that would seem to indicate that this isn't too serious. But it's a pitcher with an injury or a concern to his throwing hand arm. So like, yeah, that's automatically, you have to meet that with some kind of skepticism.
It's super I don't know, surprising, but it's just like I feel like I'm having deja vu of 2024, where, and not exactly the Mariners side of things, but we're getting into spring training where we only have like a couple more weeks before we have opening day, and like starting pitchers like you mentioned, Garrett Cole, now looking for a second opinion because they don't want to just trust this doc that's basically saying he's going to be done for a little bit. But I mean, the Orioles also just lost Grayson Rodriguez. I just saw that pop up. So it's like we're seeing a lot of main starters for these teams falling off before the season even starts again after last season. The sad part is that right now one of those guys is one of ours. And I guess that begs this question from I think every fan. All right, so are we passing that baton to Hancock? Which, Colby, you're talking last because I know your opinion. But Jonathan Diaz,
he's a great guy.
Casey Lawrence, yeah, he's a great guy. He's a nice guy ever, right? Or Logan Evans. Like, we have these guys that are just kind of like, okay, like, are we sure? How are they going to do? I mean, at this point, I probably am leaning towards Diaz. No?
Well, I'll say, first of all, the last thing I'll say about the previous discussion, thank you to the Mariners for doing the MRI before this was all released, instead of leaving us on George Kirby's undergoing an MRI on his pitching, whatever, and us all having to freak out about it. So thank you.
Rare
for
Mariners
that
messaging win.
Wow. Yeah, I know. Good communications, guys. Thank you. I feel like for me, Emerson Hancock is probably the front runner right now to fill in that role for the meantime. Diaz, I mean, I don't know, just no confidence at all. I have way more confidence in Hancock delivering a quality start than Jonathan Diaz, because he actually did do it a few times last year. So there is that. And then like Logan Evans, I just think, why rush it for this when that's like Hancock, this is kind of what his role is at this point. He is the spot starter, the guy you use to fill in for when guys go down. So what would be the point in keeping Hancock in AAA? I mean, dude's not developing a whole lot more, let's be real. And putting up a guy like Logan Evans who is developing and is still needing that work to be done, that wouldn't make any sense to me. So, no one, I think, is making the case that Hancock is like the new SP5 for the long term. That's ridiculous. Just for the time that Kirby's going to be out, which hopefully is fairly minimal, I'm fine with watching Hancock every fifth day, because at least he gives you a better chance than in my opinion, Jonathan Diaz to keep you in the game and give you a chance to win at least. So that's
You
where
think they
I'm
would
at.
platoon that fifth? Like, what if it was Hancock and Diaz, like giving them
I mean,
two or three innings each, and then you have the bullpen take over, almost like an opener, but you have two starters.
you could do that, but then you also have to realize that's an extra roster spot that you have to take someone else out of, right? Instead of just one.
I figure they would
I
both be
could,
on
I
there,
could,
but
well, I don't think Diaz is making it unless another injury happens, which, hopefully not, crossing the fingers. But I mean, you could do that in the sense of like sending them up and down for like, let's say a team is, really bad against lefties, then maybe fine. Because isn't Diaz a lefty, or am I wrong?
no, he's a righty.
Yeah, so
He's a
I could
left
see that happening, and they kind of did that. I feel like that one time last year, where they whoever Diaz pitched against, it was like they're a
White
bit
Sox.
worse against lefties.
White Sox.
Yeah, well, and then that might have just been the White Sox. Like, who cares who we put up there? But
You say that, and they scored 18 runs against us not too long ago. So
Yeah, I
you can
know.
blame the wind if you want.
Against
I know.
Emerson Hancock and Logan Evans.
yeah, I know. I'm personally excited to see the Josh Rojas Revenge tour here. So anytime he comes to Seattle, he's gonna hit a bomb for sure. But yeah, I don't
Why are
see
you
them.
saying shit like that?
Hey man, I like the flow. He's like Hancock seems like a very good dude, and whether
anymore.
he's productive or not, I enjoyed watching him play. So
I enjoyed him at the beginning of the season last year.
oh yeah, I mean it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
that
I
was
agree.
it. After
Yeah.
that, I'm like, oh,
Yeah, I
dude.
get it. I
But
get
I
it.
feel like he's a vibe guy. Like he vibed off of the play when the team's doing good, he does good. Because that's when we were doing well, and then when we stopped doing good, he just disappeared. And I mean,
Well,
I don't know. Maybe
everyone
that
did.
was a everybody did.
Everybody did.
Gosh,
Good
and
point.
yeah, I don't know. So Colby already says no. Diaz 100% over Hancock. We're just gonna say that. I'm speaking for you at this point.
The audacity.
The audacity. Oh, I mean, honestly, like who? Unless is there somebody else that you would maybe Blast or one of these other guys? Who would you think that should be given an opportunity to fill that five slot? Let's just say let's go 3 starts into the year. Hancock's in there. Kirby's still not back. Who are you like? You know what? Hancock's not pulling it off. Kirby's not back. We need to put somebody else in there. Who would be your backup to Hancock? If obviously we're thinking Hancock's going to get that job.
Sure. First things first. Emerson Hancock, really good dude. Terrible pitcher.
I
Terrible.
really want him on this podcast just for us to talk to him. Like, hey man, you're awesome. You suck, but I love you.
Yeah. Bad pitcher. So what I would do, right, if I were the GM, I would go sign Spencer Turnbull. I would go sign Drew Smiley. I would go get somebody who is actually a number 5 starter, and that's what I would do. Now, last night, Evans and Hancock both pitched. Last night. I happen to think Evans looked significantly better than Hancock. I think if you did box score scouting, it might look like Hancock was a little bit better. I think Evans is better than him right now, but I don't think the gap is wide enough to, if you don't think Evans is ready or you think there's more to get out of Evans by sitting him down, that's fine. That's fine. Because I think we know who Emerson is at this stage of his career. But I would go get a Spencer Turnbull because remember, the Mariners didn't spend all $15 million, and I cringe that I have to say all 15, like that's such a high number. But they left some money open for in-season additions for things like this. And so go spend it.
Yeah.
Turnbull was pretty good last year. As for like the platooning thing or the opener thing, what's a little interesting, might be going under the radar here, is that the Mariners did claim a few days ago Seth Martinez, who does pitch for the Astros. And he was known for going, 1 2/3, 2 1/3. Like he would go multiple innings pretty often for them. And he was kind of the mop-up guy and all that. So he does have the ability to give you some length out of the bullpen. So you might just do, Hancock is going to go 3 or 4, and then we're going to go to Martinez, and Martinez, kind of a funky side armor, mix it up the second time through the lineup or however you want to do it. So they could do that. And Martinez is probably going to make the team anyways. Like you don't have to use an extra play or an extra roster spot on Diaz, who wouldn't make the team, and Martinez could actually pitch in other situations as well. So you could do that. My answer would be go get a veteran. And there's a couple out: Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, Drew Smiley, Spencer Turnbull. And,
You
the
think we
nice
could
thing to
bring
me,
back Patrick Corbin? Like bring him back
bring
to what he
back.
was supposed to be?
Oh,
Like not bring him back to Seattle, like bring him back to what he was supposed to be
I
with our
highly
pitching
doubt it.
instruction. Yeah.
I really
Okay.
doubt it, but I actually kind of likes Corbin. So that I don't, Ty's kind of stupid, but maybe he's right this time.
I mean, as a
So
lefty in T-Mobile, he could just get results and be
That's
terrible,
what I'm,
but still like.
that's what I'm saying. It would be cool to have a
yeah,
lefty in our rotation.
yeah, that's
At
why I
least
like
I
Drew
would think
Smiley.
so. Or we could just go get Descalvani back.
Yeah, he's
That
also
one's
out there.
back to Seattle.
Yeah, and then also
And
one
maybe
thing to
Mitch
keep in
Haniger
mind.
would be good.
Oh, dare to
What was
dream.
that? I stepped on you.
No, I was just gonna say one other thing to keep in mind is that be on the lookout. These, every year there's a couple guys who get traded at the end of spring training. They're not going to make their club. They're out of options or they have an opt out. And so they end up just getting traded to, essentially it's like, remember all these years ago, the Mike Montgomery trade where the Mariners just kind of stole Mike Montgomery from the Royals
Mhm.
because he was out of options or whatever the order was there. Like that could also happen. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, I think like if I were making a decision, I would go get a veteran. And yeah, to me, Hancock versus Evans or Diaz, like I think Evans is by far the best out of those three. But again, like, is it such a big difference between Hancock and Evans right now that if you think you would be doing a disservice to Evans by putting him in the big leagues right away, then fine, send him down. That's fine. There are no good answers here. Is the unfortunate truth. And you just whoever you pick up, whoever you put in that spot, they're not going to give you George Kirby production. That's a fact. So it's just kind of about mitigating things, and I do think that you could get creative. And I would also point out that if you look at the Mariners' schedule early on, if they want to, they could skip his spot in the rotation a couple times. Now, do they want to, do they like the idea of giving Logan Gilbert an extra day off early in the year? Yeah, they probably do.
Yeah. I
But you're
say
not
they're going to
asking,
Munoz the rotation.
right. But again, you're not asking these guys to pitch on short rest. You're just not asking that. You're not allowing them to pitch on an extra day's rest because they have a couple Thursdays off in a row and all that. So there's a lot of ways they could do this. What do I think they're going to do? I would go get a guy. What do I think they're going to do? They're going to roll with Hancock and they're just going to stay in the rotation that way until George is back. I think they're going to just play this extremely bland, let's say.
Well, I mean, I like the idea of going out and getting somebody. Of course, would they? I don't know, but you made a good point when it came to the free agents. Like even waivers, like guys that aren't going to make the major league team, and then they ended up just placing them on the waivers for somebody else to pick up because they want to clear space or whatever their reasons are. So going that route makes sense. The only thing I'd be concerned about Turnbull is the fact that he hasn't been a full season starter since 2019, and that year he pitched a 4.61 ERA with a 1.44 WHIP. It's not terrible. It's definitely a five-man, sorry, pitching in the fifth-man rotation. But everything else after that, I mean, 11 starts, 9 starts, 7 starts, 7 starts. Even though last year was his best year ERA-wise, he only pitched 54 innings. So, and he's a Boris client.
Hopefully you only need him for 3 or 4 starts. And then he did pitch out of the bullpen last year, so you could slide him back there.
Which would be good because we need bullpen help.
Yeah. So, whatever. It's one of those things where it's like there are no good options, so it's a little bit hard for me to get like too upset about whatever decision they make. Although they've surprised me before.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it depends too on how much time Kirby is going to actually miss. Just a month, like Colby said, maybe they could skip a start. Maybe they do that once, so it's like 3 starts. If it's just going to be 3 or 4 starts, could really care less who it is. If it's Diaz, Hancock, whatever, they're all at T-Mobile's Pitchers Park. They could all end up getting good results. Like I was joking about Corbin a little bit, but Diaz could walk 5, strike out 0, but none of the fly balls go over the fence, and the results are totally fine. Who cares? I'm with Jake in terms of like think Evans is more somebody you just rather have develop. But if it's Kirby's going to be out longer, then, I think you want to look, maybe for Logan Evans or outside the organization. That'd be my preference, is even like a Kyle Gibson. I think that's a perfect veteran fit, but, is he going to sign here if Kirby's just going to miss a month? I mean, I guess he's doesn't have much options right now, but, I think a lot of it just depends on, how long Kirby is actually going to miss, which I'm sure they don't really know for certain right now. So it's tough to answer that. But if it's just a month, I honestly don't care. I think it's fine. I think any one of these guys can be good for 3 to 5 starts. If it's longer than that, then we have some, legitimate concern and maybe need to talk about who needs to take this spot, long term potentially.
Well, hopefully Hancock turns into a good pitcher, according to Colby. That'd be, that's something that we need to work on here. But, I mean, and maybe it'll be something quick. We don't have to worry about it, and this is not going to be a big deal, because I think we need that money for probably another bat, in my opinion. If not, go to the bullpen, because the bullpen needs help. There's still a lot of injury questions there, and that brings me to the next topic that I know, at least Colby, you guys talked about it on Locked On Mariners, along with a bunch of other Mariner based podcasts that are on YouTube. But Justin Turner's comments after getting signed with the Cubs about the organization, I believe, is on USA Today, or USA, I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever
the
news organization with
Nightingale.
Bob Nightingale. Yeah, and Nightingale's been pretty infamous when it comes to, or notorious, depending on who's paying attention, for being pretty harsh on the Mariners organization, and just how they, I guess, frame how they work. Like, I guess we're just another team that could make it, but we don't. We're a Rockies organization, make stupid calls, stupid moves. I've seen him do those kind of comparisons, even though personally I don't see us anywhere near the Rockies or the Angels or the Athletics or Marlins for that matter. But Justin Turner, as much as I want him to come back, and I think he was a little bit bitter that he didn't get a simple contract to come back to Seattle, because he saw what the potential was. He laid into the Mariners organization pretty hard, although he did defend Jerry Dipoto. So this, I think, ultimately comes down to ownership, which is what he was kind of throwing mud at. And you quote here, the fact that they missed the playoffs by 1 game and didn't go out and add an impact bat or 2 when you have the best pitching staff in baseball just seems absurd to me. He says, honestly, as much as I wanted to be back there, if I was the only piece they brought back in, I would be saying the same thing. What the hell are we doing? Are you even trying? Says they're not going to be, or not going to a better, there's not going to be a better time for us to go for it. So I don't know what they're doing. I'm very confused. It's a head scratcher for me, which that last piece has been pretty much the takeaway, that it's a head scratcher that's making the headlines. Talks about the pitching. I think most of the team agrees. I think there's a lot of teammates that last year spoke out about the questionable moves that they during the offseason, or what they're doing with the team. That would be Cal Raleigh, and then JP backing him up. So it keeps piling on, whether it's the Teoscar comments about the stadium, he doubled down and did it twice, whether it's players that left to other teams and they're super happy to be there, even though their stats didn't get better. Kellenick, by the way, with all your temper tantrums and breaking your foot or whatever it was in the dugout by punching a Gatorade bottle. Like, everybody who leaves seems to have nothing but negative things to say about this organization. And it's not the team, the teammates, it's not the coaches. It's front office and higher, even though Justin said it's not really Jerry's fault. So what is this going to build up enough to where ownership's going to see a failure in the future because nobody's going to want to come to Seattle and play? Or as long as we're loyal fans, we're going to be doing this limbo of hoping and with the bare minimum possible to get us to 54% or whatever the goal is now?
I mean, at least on my end, like, first of all, I mean, he didn't tell any lies. I mean, this is all what we all kind of know, and this is the take
One
that I
of
think we all
us.
share.
One of us.
Yeah, he's just one of us at this point. Like, yeah, it's not ultimately the number one reason for the Mariners, staying at where they're at is ownership. It's always going to be that, because there's really no reason why we should be in a bottom 15 payroll or whatever. And I don't know if we are anymore, but it just still, it's like you look at the payroll last year and then the payroll we're starting with this year, which granted could be higher a little bit depending on how the trade deadline works. It's actually like 750K less than our ending payroll last year. So it's just like you look at that when you're in a contention window, and with both of your the actual division rivals that like actually pose a threat to you right now are as weak as they've been. You can kind of say that about the Rangers a little bit. I don't really know how to feel about them. They're kind of just weird, but it's crazy that they're not injecting even just like 20-30 million dollars to get like that extra really big piece or a couple really nice pieces. It makes absolutely no sense. I'm sorry, Pete Alonso, or
you see right here,
I mean, literally whoever. Like honestly, whoever. Justin Turner could have been one of those people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just like I don't really understand. And I think we know why it's happening, but it's just we don't understand. How you can then keep saying that like your ultimate goal is to bring a championship here. Well, I'm sorry, but unless a lot of cards fall the right way, that's not going to happen. I mean, well, there's obviously those runs that every team can have where, maybe we do reach the playoffs and go on a nice run, and, like the D-backs a couple years ago. Who knows? But number one is always going to be John Stanton. Number two, is going to be Dipoto. At the end of the day, like he still has to be as effective as he can with the limitations he has. So you have to criticize the moves he makes within the limitations he has and be like, could he have done better with those limitations? And, I think we all could agree that like this would be a better team if he had more money. Great. Well, ultimately, that's not the reality we're in. We're in the reality of their payroll being 145 million, like something like, I think that's what it's at right now. So you can still be like, hey, you whiffed on Colton Wong. You whiffed on, Tommy Listello. From the get-go, what are we thinking, right? So there's still things you can criticize Dipoto about. You can also especially criticize him, like talking and ever opening his mouth in front of a microphone, which I know Colby has feelings about, and we all feel that way too. But at the end of the day, like if you think Dipoto is the problem, then you are not thinking nuanced enough about what is going on here, because he's simply not the problem. He's one of the problems depending on what aspect of the organization you're looking at, because yes, he may have been whiffing on these offensive guys. He certainly has not whiffed on pitching, and drafting has been phenomenal. We're all looking forward to the draft this year because they have the 3rd overall, and we're like, this regime knows how to draft. So it's like you have to cut him. I don't want to say cut him some slack. That's not the right word. You have to be willing to be open-minded enough to congratulate him on his successes and where he does well, and be like, these other places you're not doing good enough. Just plain and simple, you're not doing good enough. So yeah, everything Justin said was fine, and he wasn't saying you couldn't criticize him, Dipoto, at all. He was just saying like ultimately the problem is higher up than that. So I'm with him on that. I'm really happy to see how, especially since the 54% conference, which I'm just been happy to see that like not only this doesn't feel like a contained to Seattle Mariners Twitter anymore. You know what I mean? Like the national media members, Jeff Passan, Ken Rosenthal, Bob Nightingale, have all talked about it at this point. Foul Territory can't not talk about the Mariners and their low payroll at this point. So yeah. So it's just like, I'm glad that it's getting this attention, because ultimately this is what could eventually lead to a change. It's not going to be boycotting. It's not going to be, oh, I didn't buy this Mariners jacket I normally would have because screw John Stanton, hit him in the pocket, right? That's not where the change is going to happen. The change is going to be by voicing opinion and getting the people whose opinions reach the greater masses, like a Jeff Passan, to talk about this and say on MLB Network, what are the Mariners doing? Look at their ownership not giving the fans what they deserve. That's the best thing that could possibly happen. Will it force them to sell? I mean, ultimately, they're probably making enough profit. Like, there's nothing that could happen that's going to change that. But it's, if there is anything that were to potentially sway that, that's what it's going to be. So I'm happy that these types of things are coming out.
Jay, Colby.
Yeah, it was actually kind of like refreshing a little bit to hear ownership getting blasted and Jerry kind of getting defended. Not like I'm not trying to like be a Jerry stan or anything, but like, we've kind of, it's always kind of been lumped together, and it is ownership and the front office, work together and everything. But it was kind of interesting.
And I'm gonna cover you. So I don't mean to interject, but I'm gonna cover you on that. Like you put, if this, once this goes out on Twitter, on X, automatically you're a Jerry stamp, no matter what, if you back him up in any way. But that's people that are ignorant enough to look at it and see that he is working with what he's got. We might not agree with what he did with what he's got, but if he had a Mets payroll, we would be in the World Series for the next 6 years. I would trust that with his ability to be able to wheel and deal and make shit happen. So sorry, but go ahead.
No, you're good. It's one of the reasons I'm kind of getting away from Twitter outside of DMing some of you guys and stuff because I can't deal with that stuff anymore. But yeah, I mean, it was just kind of refreshing. Like normally just everybody's lumped in. So it was kind of interesting to hear a former player kind of defend Jerry a little bit. So, and he defended the coaching staff, talked Dan up a little bit too, which is awesome because you want the guys being together on the field. That's going to matter once the season starts. I mean, but I think Jake just nailed it overall on the head. I can't add too much more to it than anything he said. So, like I said, it's nice to see some of the national media picking up because it kind of felt like it just used to be our community a little bit. And I used to think like, maybe we're overreact. Maybe I just don't know or something. And now it's like, okay, it's starting to get picked up a little bit to the point where it seems like we're getting something every week a little bit. So it's almost like, okay, we get it. Like, but
that's what's helping though. I mean that's the thing though. It's hitting the national level to where, it hurts for us as Mariners fans because it's just regurgitating the same shit that we've been talking about for God knows how long. But it's like the national baseball fandom, which is hard to really focus on here in the Pacific Northwest because of the time zone difference. When you live on the East Coast, like the games that are happening for West Coast teams are so late that you're not really paying attention to them and you miss it most of the time. But the fact that I think there's people around this country, and I'm speaking for people that are not Mariners fans, but are kind of open to the idea of there being a team that just has not made it, actually winning and becoming a competitive team, not just within a division, but among baseball itself. We've always been that kind of quiet competitor, and then when it comes to playoffs, like at 2022, we all thought that game was over against the Blue Jays, and then we came back, and it was like, oh, okay, this is a team that can really do it. They have the potential, they have the ability, and then moving forward, all of a sudden your rotation is just insane, and it's like, okay, you're not the Rockies. You don't have like the 16th or 17th best pitching rotation with like the 20th batting. It's you have a 1 or 2 pitching staff, and then you have a 28th hitting. It's like anybody else seems to be able to find a way to fix this, but we just haven't reached it. And of course we blame T-Mobile Park, we blame God knows what, just the players falling apart, too old, whatever. But what hurts, I think, me the most, going back to Justin Turner, is the fact that he wanted to come back and we didn't even give him an opportunity. Because I really like Big Red here in Seattle. I liked it. I did personally.
If we had filled our other spots,
I
sure.
think we did.
But and if we were in the market for just a DH only guy, sure. I mean, that makes sense. But we had other priorities. It felt like.
Oh, we did.
Right.
Even if we were to say, hey, we have $2 million we can offer you for a single season, like if they at least threw that out there.
Well, I think they did. I don't know if you guys saw Ryan Divish's article, but Divish pointed out that the Mariners, at several points throughout the offseason, offered Justin Turner a contract was more than the $6.5 million he got from the Cubs. So the Mariners did indeed try to bring back Turner a couple of times. Now we don't know how much more than 6.5 million. Maybe it's 6.6, but that those efforts pretty much stopped when Solano took 3.5 million. So, to their credit, they did try to retain Justin Turner. Turner kind of waited and waited and waited and probably was waiting to see what else the Mariners were going to do before he committed here. So in a very real way, they probably still lost him when they could have had him, but it wasn't because they weren't offering him enough money. It was because, he was probably looking at everything else that was happening with the organization was like, well, I mean, go do something else. And then because Turner is at the end of his career, right? He's probably looking for one last shot here to, make a deep playoff run. And while I think we could argue whether the Cubs are better than the Mariners or not, they did add Kyle Tucker, so they did at least something that is impactful and is going to be, interesting and exciting for a guy like Turner. So, in the Turner case, like, first of all, again, like everybody else said nothing wrong. He didn't lie. I think, one of the important skills that, just us as content creators should have, and I think most of us do, is you have to separate ownership from the front office, the baseball ops people, because we always need to remember the power dynamic here is that Jerry and Justin report to one person in the entire organization. Well, one group, and that is the ownership group. So I think it's very important that we separate them. I understand why just kind of the run of the mill average fan doesn't, because it's just they're not players, they're not coaches, so they're other. And I get that, and sometimes it feels like you're talking to kind of a wall when you try to explain that to people. But again, I totally understand that. There's a lot of things to criticize Jerry Poto for. We don't need to certainly make things up that aren't his fault or that are his fault. Oh, he didn't. Why didn't he spend more money on Pete Alonso? Well, if he doesn't have it, what do you want him to do? So I think it's important to separate that, it gives you context to understand. So it was kind of funny to see a veteran who's been around the block and a lot of different teams defend Jerry Dipoto. That's a player who gets it. He understands how front offices operate. He's probably going to work in one someday. And the last time we heard a player kind of directly, take a shot or praise Jerry Dipoto was Kyle Seager. So very different opinions of those two guys. So it is interesting. Look, Jerry is a polarizing dude. I happen to think he's pretty good at his job if you look at the totality of his resume. Certainly don't want him to ever talk into a microphone ever again or sit down for an interview ever again. And yeah, I think honestly that's his biggest problem, because I think when you look at what is happening with the ownership and what ownership is willing to spend, and then they kind of throw Jerry out there to go, spin this, cover us, take the arrows. I think it's very important to give Jerry some leeway there. But yeah, he says some bananas stupid stuff. And Turner said nothing that was wrong or disingenuous to any degree. So yeah, I mean, as Mariner fans, it's a little exhausting that, we're getting picked on a little bit. Our team's getting picked on a little bit, but A, they deserve it. And B, I guess if you want to give, ownership any kind of credit, which you shouldn't, but if you do, you could be like, well, at least we're not the Marlins. Cool, awesome. So yeah, I do think it's good that the national folks are kind of putting pressure on the Mariners, and that's ultimately what it's going to take. You're going to have to basically embarrass them into spending more money, and it might not work. It certainly didn't work for the Oakland A's, now the Sacramento A's. So yeah,
don't call them that. They don't want that. Yeah.
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 But yeah,
even though they put the patch on their shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just one of those things.
It's interesting.
Go ahead, Colby.
Touch on it.
End. Oh no, I was just saying. It's just.
There's a delay here.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where
nice.
There's nothing you can do about it, right? People are going to be mad about what they're going to be mad about. People are going to like who they like. They're going to hate who they hate. And, you're just not going to win everybody over. You're not going to convince everybody. And Jerry's been here long enough that people have picked their side. And I think most people, it's interesting actually is that we did a poll for Locked On, and we had 550 respondents or whatever, and about 60% said they are at least somewhat confident in Jerry Dipoto in the front office, and another about 20% might be numbers might be a little bit here, but said that they had a lot of confidence in him. So 80% of our respondents said they trust the front office to some degree. That's what we call a super majority. So it really is just kind of the loud, super loud voices that are kind of like shouting at each other a lot of the time. So, it's just one of those things. Meanwhile, by the way, confidence in ownership, I believe 70% said they had no confidence in ownership, none. And another 25%, I think it was, said that they had not very much. So yeah, people, at least, the people who took our poll seem to be able to separate the two groups. But yeah, overall, the disappointment level is very real amongst the players, both here in Seattle and outside of the game, amongst agents and amongst the media. And you hope that all trickles down and eventually puts some pressure on the ownership group.
Imagine them going to like an elite meeting of just MLB owners, and then Stanton walks in, and then it's like that's when it will actually affect them, when they're just like there's Stanton over there, cheap ass guy.
Well, let's be clear. All the owners understand what he's doing. They understand he is profiting. He's profiting from this business.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really think owners are really going to be looking down on him a whole lot. I mean,
No, it's a
if
joke,
anything,
but still.
yeah, I know, I hear you. It's just like, so I guess I was going to make 2 points though to end at least this conversation out. First is that I saw some people kind of being like, well, why would you offer a couple $1 million more to Carlos Santana versus Justin Turner? Well, Carlos Santana was a Gold Glove first baseman last year, so he's offering you Gold Glove first base defense along with a fine bat with some power, which part of it feels like this team needs a little bit, but also and so there's like that part, right, where it's Justin is probably, he can stand at first base, but he really should be just kind of a DH guy. So that's part of it. And then the other thing I was going to say with Turner, and another reason to take these comments so I guess seriously, is just because, like Colby said, like Turner's a veteran, but not only is he a veteran, he was one of the like pivotal players of a pretty phenomenal Dodgers team for a while, and won a ring. And so he's been there, done that. Not only he hasn't just been a veteran, he's been playing in the MLB on some middling team for 15 years. Great, because he's been in the game. This dude has won before, so he understands what it takes to win. And so that's another reason to take those comments even, or at least put a little bit more credence in those comments for me as well.
Yep.
I'm just ready for the season to start. I'm ready for games. I'm like, not just to do my post game recaps, but just like all this talk and all the stuff we go through. Like, I just want to see the team on the field, and then we can evaluate it. Because if this team wins, nobody's going to care about any. I mean, some people still will, but like, I mean, we all do. It's all part of us. We follow the team more than most casual people do, which good for them, honestly, to an extent. But like, I'm just so ready for actual regular season baseball. So
It's a good gauge for me is like my mom's a big Mariners fan and everything, and I grew up being a baseball fan because of that, and so she fell in love with the team, but she's not analytically following them by any means, and knowing her, she's never going to see this ever. So when I ask her questions about like, what do you think of this guy, what do you think of these people, and I get her response, I'm like, okay, that's what majority of non-diehard fans are seeing. So it helps me balance out my psychotic side where I'm just like, well, this doesn't make any sense because this and this and this, and Colby mentioned this, which is a good point because this guy mentioned this. There needs to be a baseline of like what the general public is seeing and saying versus us who dig into stuff so deep, and we're looking at other teams as well.
I've said the same thing when I've talked about the boycott thing before. I'm like, listen, the people you're calling on to boycott the Mariners Twitter makes up maybe conservatively 5% of the fan base. Maybe 10% if you really want to push it. So you're telling 10% of fans even know what the hell you're talking about. The other 90% have made a trip to Seattle in summer and are like, I'm going to go catch a Mariner game too. And I'm going to drink a beer in the pen and I'm going to chat with my friends while the game's going on. It's going to be a good time. And they have no idea what's going on with the team. They're just like, I know Julio's good. I know our pitching's pretty solid, and like that's it, and that's fine to be that fan. So that's just another thing where it's just like when we're talking about these things, there are, I feel like fans are starting to be more trying to kind of get into the weeds of these types of conversations, but it's never going to be a majority. It's just simply never going to be a majority that care at all about these topics. They just want to go see a baseball game, have some fun, and that be that. And hey, if the Mariners are winning, cool. If they're not, oh well. That's just how it is.
Yeah. And I mean, touching on that boycott thing, obviously was never going to work because the teams that did do a boycott, they left. And that's exactly where, I mean, I fall into this whole very scary moment, and it's scary for me, and I think majority of you guys are just going to shrug it off and not think it's a big deal. And I think a lot of the viewers that watch this are probably not going to think of it as a big deal, or going to leave comments down below saying you're like, you're crazy, it's never going to happen. But I've seen crazier things. The fact that Oakland's going to Sacramento then after 3 years moving to Vegas is just wild to me. But it's happening. And look at Tampa Bay. They lost their stadium. Are they going to be moving somewhere else? Because I've been following their contracts with the city. The Rays lied about stuff that they were going to be doing. I don't want to dig into too much, but there's crazy things that can happen. And it only takes one little piece to push the path off another direction to where teams are gone forever. I mean, look at the Expos. But just recently, in fact, I believe it was 3 days ago, there's been a rendering of an official blueprint for, well, sadly, Portland is looking at building an MLB stadium and having an MLB team. And if we start walking down this road of boycotting and not showing up, and even if it's still profitable, if we start cutting into Stanton's profit margins, because that's all he cares about. He doesn't care about baseball. I'm going to put this out there. I would love, if he wants to tell me to my face, which he doesn't need to because he doesn't care about my opinion, but that he actually cares about baseball, I'm going to ask you this. How do you show that you care when you try to withhold the most amount of money possible so you can profit yourself instead of giving back to a team that's been dying for a World Series since 1977? You had to have renderings of a possible baseball expansion team from somewhere, or could be the Mariners sold to Portland that's literally in your backyard, Jake, which would be great for you because then you can at least go to any Portland scuba divers teams, whatever the hell their name's going to be. And honestly, this looks awesome. These renders look amazing.
Yeah.
This would be amazing for Portland, but who's gonna expand? Who are they gonna expand off of? And that's an AL, I'm assuming an AL or NL Western team. They're already full. We brought in the Astros. That made it 5, which basically leveled it out for the rest of the divisions. So where does Portland go? And is this more of a sign of maybe they'll just buy out the Mariners and move them down there? Because these look awesome. This reminds me of like Seattle mixed with Oracle Park. You tell me.
So as the guy who this is in my backyard, as the guy who actually lives near Portland. So first of all, I want to make it clear, to me, these renderings look more like Great American Ballpark than anywhere else. I'm not saying anything bad about Great American, and the renderings are great, but those towers specifically in right center, like very much remind me of Great American. But first of all, I mean, this is they're gonna hopefully. It sounds like 2028 is what they're trying to do for this.
Yeah.
The Mariners are not going to sell that amount of time. It's not. We're going to be with the Stanton and Co. probably at least through 2030, if I were to guess. And even if they sold, I don't think it's selling the team to move. It would be because you cannot tell me that Portland is a better market than Seattle. Seattle's a bigger market. You're going to make a lot more money in Seattle than you are in Portland. So that's not going to happen. This is strictly going to be an expansion team of some kind. What division they're in, I mean, maybe they do restructure the AL West, because the NL West makes a whole lot of sense. All the teams in there make sense to me. The AL West, you're probably looking at Houston probably coming out of the AL West. So, they're probably restructuring it to where like they're in the AL Central, and then maybe they find some, I don't know what they would do exactly, but yeah, for me, it's kind of weird because, as someone who lives, pretty close to Portland, it's like, I have a hard time seeing us being able to support a MLB team. At least attendance wise, I just have a hard time seeing that, because the largest sports team we have right now is the Trailblazers, but attendance is not nearly the same for NBA games than it is for baseball games. They play, 81 games a year. So it's, 40 something games at home, versus 82, literally doubling the amount of games that would need to be played in Portland. And I'm not saying like if the team was good, like that would be a problem. But it's just with expansion teams, you can't expect them to be good for probably the first at least 5, maybe more years, because you're getting kind of all the cast-offs of the other teams, and then you're drafting probably high up for the first couple times and hoping those guys turn out, whatever. So you're not looking at a good team at all for the first 5 years. So I think it'd be a little tough, because we actually used to have a AAA team before the Timbers were a thing, and so they played at Providence Park, which was initially a baseball stadium. They turned it into a soccer stadium now. But even then, and I know AAA is not the MLB, but I remember going to those games and being like, no one being there, and it's just like, I understand there's a bit of a difference there, but I have a hard time seeing it personally.
Rangers games are pretty quiet though too.
So maybe it's just AAA. Yeah, maybe it's just AAA. I don't know, but it feels kind of just weird for me to think that an MLB team would be here, because realistically, it's the only other step up is the NFL for like how big your market needs to be to support the team. And I feel like the NBA, at least the Trailblazers, it can be kind of iffy. Not like when they're playing good, it's fine, obviously, but it's just, that's the same for every team. If they're playing good, people are going to show up. And then you also have the problem of everyone here is already Mariner fans. If we're talking a majority, right? Like if you're talking regional majority, the Mariners have been the Pacific Northwest team since their inception. So it's like, how many people are really going to switch allegiances to the Mariners? I know some people may say, well, I mean, hey, people are tired of ownership and people are tired of Jerry DiPoto. But we just had this conversation. Sorry, my dog. Oh, great. We just had this. Oh my god.
I think
you can move on to.
Off.
Yeah, we just had this
conversation.
Yeah, we just had this conversation, right? About like 5% of the fan base even cares about that. So it's not going to turn enough people for, I think, it to matter a whole lot. It certainly will be nice, at least for me geographically, to have like.
I think your dog disagrees with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you guys move on while I mute my mic.
The first dog barking was mine in Jake's defense. The very first bark 5 minutes ago was mine. So Jake is off the hook for that. Like, I can't comment too much on like the whole, I'm not good with the whole, is ownership going to sell and move and all that. And like, I don't really know with Portland. I'm in Arizona, so I don't have all the insight to everything with the cities. But in terms of like boycott stuff, for me, listen, fan however you want to fan. If you don't want to support the team, go to games and do anything, then more power to you. Do that. But if you still want to go to games again, you're not a bad fan for buying a Mariners jersey or a hat or tickets to the game and a hot dog. Like, it's still a great experience to go to the ballpark and everything. And that's more where I'm at with it. I would probably just agree with what Jake said in terms of the stadium and everything with with Portland. So I don't really know the whole logistics on that. But yeah, just in terms of, the original point about the boycotting, that's where I'm at. If you want to do it, both sides, don't force anybody to do something they don't want to do. And that goes both ways for me personally. I don't think it's going to do anything. Like Jake said, I think, the Mariners, Twitterverse, YouTube, all that, we're probably like most 5% of the people that go to games. So it's not even going to really resonate with anything. And if the team wins, people show up. I mean, this ownership group was here in 22. And I remember, I wasn't at the game, so I can't speak to. I remember watching the TBS broadcast, and they're like, this is like a college football atmosphere out here. Like, this fan base is ready to explode. This is a baseball town. I know the 12th man and everything. I'm a huge Seahawks fan, but this is a baseball town. If the Mariners get in the playoffs, I mean, how many times have we all watched clips of like certain cities just rocking during the playoffs? Like, man, I want that to be us. This town would be electric with a Mariners deep playoff run. So, that's not really anything to do with what you're talking about Portland, but just had to throw that in there.
But that's what's been taken advantage of, is the fact that you're right. The city is, I mean, anybody who's watching this as a Mariners fan, that you still love the team even if you hate ownership, and we show up, and that's our flaw, because that is what funds these owners that don't give a shit. Basically, it's a lose-lose game. I've always been saying this. Like, if you boycott them, they'll sell. You never know what's going to happen after. It's like working at a department store where you hate your boss. You're hoping they either get fired, they get released, or they move somewhere else to a different job or promote, and they just get away. But you never know who's going to step in, who could be worse. You just don't know. Or it could mean that the store gets shut down, and then you're out of a job. And that's kind of the metaphor I kind of use on this. There, it's always a big risk. But Portland, I lived in Portland very briefly when I was younger, and I've gone down there multiple times. As much as I don't care for that city whatsoever personally, I've walked around. The drug issues are really bad down there. The riots and activism that I've seen when I was down there, maybe it's just bad luck every single time I go down there, but I'm just not a huge fan of it. But I still think this is beautiful. I think this would be good for that city in general, just to bring in tourists, because I don't think the Timbers, and I don't think that the Trailblazers are really bringing in massive amounts of people to kind of really bring that city alive and make it something that is comparable to Seattle. But things can change. I mean, I also forgot about the Twins. They're most likely getting sold soon. That's something that's going to happen. Whether or not that's going to keep them in Minnesota or not, I don't see why not. But there's plenty of cities, including Salt Lake City and Utah. There's Tennessee. There's now Portland, that are putting out real renders of building plans of what they're going to do. And then, yeah, maybe not in the next 5 years or something, but this is kind of concerning if we completely fail in the next 5 years for this team, and then the fans just kind of give up or look somewhere else to be a fan. It's possible.
Yeah. The first thing is, as long as John Stanton is the owner of the Mariners, there will not be a team in Portland. And I don't say that to mean like, oh, John is protecting us or anything like that. The simple fact of the matter is that Stanton is very close with Rob Manfred, and Stanton would be furious. The Mariners would be furious if they put another team in his region where they now have to split TV money, where they now have to split, fan bases and all that stuff. So Stanton is not like that. And because him and Manfred are so tight, probably not going to happen. On top of Portland just not being that good of a media market. It's really not. It's, I've been to Portland a lot. I go once or twice a year. And I'm not there enough to really know, but it doesn't strike me as a huge sports town. It's certainly not going to, have a better case to be made than, Charlotte or Raleigh or Nashville, or even like Austin, like another team in Texas. How about Montreal? Or, like there's just a lot of other places that are either have a baseball history, a major league baseball history, or have bigger media markets that they can tap into, where Portland's just not going to make a lot of sense. I mean, a team in San Antonio or Austin makes a lot more sense than a team in Portland. So I think, their renderings are fine. They're cool to look at and everything. But ask a Sonics fan how awesome renderings are when you're trying to convince an owner of an NBA team to move back to Seattle. We've had to wait for expansion for the last, what's it been now? 15 years, 20 years almost. So it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's cool. We want this. We want this. You got to attract a winning bid because no team right now in baseball is moving from their current location to Portland. Not going to happen because Stanton and the Mariners would not, allow that. And unfortunately, to kind of go way back to a point that was made earlier, uh, the other owners, they like John Stanton because he makes money without spending as much as he should. And that's what they all want to do. Like owners hate Steve Cohen, the guy who's actually doing the best job as at an owner. They hate the Dodgers ownership group, the team that's actually doing what they should be doing. They don't like those guys because they make them look bad. So Stanton's going to have a ton of pull in that room. It's not going to happen. As for the realignments that could happen, I think because it would be expansion, there would be 32 teams now. So you would just have 8 divisions, 4 in each league. And if they did put a team in Portland, yeah, probably Seattle, Portland, and then depending on where the other expansion teams go. Maybe Colorado, Sacramento. Maybe Sacramento, maybe Vegas.
Colorado.
Put them in.
Get Houston out, bring the Rockies in.
Colorado and an expansion team, yes.
If you kind of look at it like how the NBA, like how they do their things. Now the NBA is wonky because they never moved Seattle out of the Pacific Northwest division. So they're still playing in a really weird. But if you look at it, right, it's like, don't you want, or you could basically put all the California teams in one division, like Angels. You have the Angels, the Dodgers, the Giants, the Padres, and then that would be your 4-team division right there. Not just the California division or whatever. And so at that point, it's Seattle. Like hypothetically, if they put a team in Portland, it still gets a little messy. Seattle's going to be in a tough spot regardless. They're just way up there. So it'd probably be, if you put all the California teams together, then you're probably looking at Seattle, Vegas, Colorado, and maybe Arizona. Like that little, I mean, there's just not an easy, clean way to do this, even with Portland being involved. So I think.
And that'll make it even more messy for the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And do they do divisions? I mean, is there, how do they handle all that? So they probably have to add another playoff team at that point, and then it gets watered down a little bit more. So, yeah, the renderings are great, and they're a great idea. And I don't think Portland's going to support a major league team for that long. I don't think any of the other markets are going to look at Portland as this untapped, reservoir of money. And it's also worth more. There's just more money. Like people have more money in the Seattle, Bellevue, in that area than they're going to in the Portland area. So to me, like Portland's not a threat. Actually, it'd be kind of cool. Like to have Portland versus Seattle rivalry again. Hopefully we have one in the in the NBA pretty soon again. I'm fine with it. Me personally, I don't care, but Seattle, the owners, they're going to care, and they'll probably use it as justification to spend even less money because they're going to be like, well, our market got in half. What do you want us to do? So, yeah, Portland would be a disaster for Seattle in a lot of different ways. And for me, as just like a fan of the sport, I'm fine with it. I don't care. Like, it's not my money that I'm losing. So, yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, the renderings are great, but I've seen a lot of renderings of basketball stadiums down by T-Mobile Park that look great. Are we on a delay?
There's a major connection delay on this. Sorry, guys.
Chad's going to have some editing to do.
Yeah, great. Yeah, awesome. It's just a little delay here. It's probably just StreamYard doing its thing. But, I mean, the only thing that'll push back on it doesn't really need any like, in-depth analysis of it. But I probably thought the same thing about the Sonics going to Oklahoma City for basketball. I wasn't thinking Oklahoma City as being a powerhouse place that really wanted an NBA there. And it happened. And maybe that's the same mindset that's here in Portland, and maybe that's the possibility. On the other side, that doesn't, I mean, I'm not saying I'm right, but that's how I felt about Seattle moving to OKC. it was just like,
Yeah.
really? Them? That seems weird, but it is what it is. But as far as like Stanton making an excuse to spend less money, yeah, but how possible is it that over a course of 5 seasons that he uses that excuse every time? People are like, you know what? Portland's spending money. I'm now Portland. We stopped showing up to Seattle, and he's like, well, shit, now my profits are getting hit really hard because they're actually doing what I want. I mean,
Are we
what are the
assuming
odds of that?
billionaires are going to spend right
Yeah,
away when
assuming.
their revenue streams are probably going to go down? It's just me personally. I don't trust billionaires to do anything that's going to be beneficial to anybody. So,
No, besides their wallet.
yeah, I mean, if it's not going to help them, they're not going to do it, and they're going to be bad probably for 5 years anyway. So I doubt they're going to spend for 5 years. But yeah, the whole thing with the Sonics going down to Oklahoma City, like, yeah, and that was really stupid, and it cost the league a ton of money. When they could have just put an expansion team down there and made a couple $1 billion each. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, look, it happened to us once, so we're obviously going to be on edge whenever this thing pops up. But I just don't think Portland is a threat to Seattle in terms of stealing away the team. But I really don't think they have the pitch to make to Major League Baseball to become the 31st or 32nd team in the league when you consider the other options that the league has. So it's really interesting. Again, if they put a team in Portland, I wouldn't be mad. That's fine by me. I'll go down to Portland and watch some baseball. That's fine. Still be a
More
Mariners
baseball.
fan.
I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the higher ups, the people who are worth $1 billion, but freak out about losing $25,000 in hot dog revenue. Like, I think those people would look at Portland and be like, nah, doesn't make us any money.
Congrats to the Portland Pickles on their new stadium, is what I'm hearing.
Pickles.
It's just congrats to the Portland Pickles.
Portland
Good for
Pickles.
you guys. You get a huge new stadium.
So their city
Best
council
stadium
just
in baseball.
voted yes.
Yeah.
That, by the way, the Portland City Council just voted yes to building the stadium.
It's going to bring the city a lot of money if it happens, for sure.
Zidle Yards? Is that what they're calling it? But
I don't know.
It's the Portland Diamond Project. I'm trying to see who the owner would be technically, but
yeah, it's right next to OHSU. I remember seeing back in the day any Cirque du Soleil people out there. That's where they would put the big tent for their shows, and now it's somewhere else. But so I remember that plot of land very fondly from those days. However, it has been literally just like a parking lot for like the last decade. So yeah, not surprised they decided that. It's on the water. That's cool and all, but I don't see Portland outbidding like Salt Lake City, for example, because I would have to wonder is the LDS Church putting in money to try to get a team there and that type of thing? Like they certainly are. Can't wait for them to close the soda shop at 7th inning instead of the beer. It's just like I feel like Salt Lake City is more likely. I don't know what's going on there as far as like stadium building or whatever. But yeah, I just, as a person who lives near Portland, it would be very weird. And I can't run it through my head how Portland could sustain a MLB team. Because with like the Trailblazers here and the Timbers and Thorns here, and like the Winterhawks, even though that's not like NHL, but, the residents take those teams very seriously for sure, which is cool, especially the Timbers. Which just kind of feels like a soccer feels like a craft like craft beer type sport in a way. Yeah, it's a very Portland sport to like and enjoy. We literally have bars here that are solely for there's one bar here I think that's like solely for just women's sports, and then like it's mainly like a lot of soccer stuff. But yeah, I MLB is just kind of in that upper echelon of like how much the fans would need to be invested to support that team to be successful with attendance and all that stuff. It's just different than NBA or MLS. It's just not the same. So
I don't know if anybody has one more take on it. I wanted to just hit one more thing before we hit the last topic, which we can do pretty quickly. So Craig Cheek is the founder and president of this Portland Diamond Project. He's a former executive leader for Nike. Also, his partner is Jed Lowry. We already know that name way back when. I'm out though on this team 100%. Russell Wilson's an investor. I don't like him, so I'm out. You guys can unsubscribe if you want. I don't like Russell Wilson, so yeah, that's just my little 2 bit in there. But yeah, I mean, they got money. Clearly, they have a lot of investors. They got a lot of people that are interested in getting this together. So maybe it'll happen. It's more baseball. I'd be happy because that renderings look beautiful. I think it'd be an awesome reason to go down there and visit and see some ball. So I'm all on board with that. Anybody else had anything on the possibility of Portland? No, for the most part. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and now jump to Colby, your tweet that you put out. Yeah, that's right. We're gonna jump on you.
Live confrontation?
Live confrontation, you son of a bitch. No.
got a live tweet reaction?
Quote. I'm kidding. You don't seem too on board with Rowdy Tellez yet making this team. I'm starting to like it. I am. And I understand as far as spots and anything on the roster, at least for the 26-man rolling into the season, I understand why he wouldn't be there, but I like him for his bat because it's alive right now. I know it's spring training, but could he possibly be the Victor Robles for 2025? That's my question, because I think it may be. No. Why?
Well, first of all, he can't run or play defense like Victor Robles can. So right there, that's like
I meant bat,
half the value.
Okay. Well, he's basically the bigger Vogelback.
I mean, yeah, but it's funny you mentioned that. Like Vogelback, big fan favorite, right? He was terrible with them. He hit sub 200 with the Mariners. Like people I didn't forget that. Yeah. So here's the thing with Tellez, right? Is that if he did make the team, right, and there were no other surprises, no late injuries, anything like that, right, your bench is going to be, on most nights, Solano, Haniger, Garver, Tellez. One of those guys will DH, but that still leaves 3 spots, even if it's Tellez, right? Like let's say Tellez DHs. Okay, your bench is Garver, Solano, and Haniger, and then probably like Ryan Bliss. There's not a lot of defense on that bench. There's not a lot of speed on that bench. There's not a lot of versatility on that bench. There's no left-handed hitters on that bench. It's just a bad fit. Now, if Rayleigh gets hurt, right? Well, Rivas wouldn't be on the team, I assume, because Bliss would be on the team. Because I
don't
think
know
Bliss,
why we're having Haniger on the team, personally.
Well, that's the problem, right? Is that like if Haniger were to, get released, get DFA'd, or I don't know, if a literal miracle happened before our eyes and he got traded, then you might be able to get away with it. But even then, like Tellez is a DH only. He's not a good first baseman. Mm-hmm. You don't want to take at bats away from Rayleigh against left-handed or against right-handed pitching. You don't want to give at bats against left-handed pitching to Tellez and take them away from Solano. That just doesn't make any sense. So there's a very small window where Tellez on the roster makes sense. And any way you want to slice it, it has to mean Haniger's not on the roster, which is fine. Like I'm certainly not sitting here telling you Haniger has to be on the roster. I'm simply telling you Haniger is going to be on the roster because the Mariners are cheap and they're not willing to just take a sunk cost and just, roll with it and keep it on the books. Haniger's going to be on this roster. Garver's going to be on this roster. Solano is going to be on this roster. So if Tellez is the DH, fine. I have one bench spot. Solano can't do anything but play first. Haniger really shouldn't do anything but DH. He certainly can't play up the middle anywhere. And Garver is my backup catcher. He can't play anywhere else either. So now it's like, okay, now do I want Leo Rivas on the bench, who's a worse player than Ryan Bliss? Am I doing that just to accommodate Rowdy Tellez, who had like a 92 WRC plus last year? No, I get
that's better than half our team last year.
It is, but you don't get base run with it. You don't get any kind of defense with it. You get no versatility with it. It just clogs things. So
Yeah.
if Haneker were to leave, then you could probably make it fit, and you just roll with Tellez as like your full-time DH for a little while, at least as long as he's hitting, and then you can take Haneker's spot, and you can kind of make that more of a you kind of have an open spot. Maybe it's a Canzone, maybe it's a somebody like that, a Rivas and Bliss. But yeah, it's pretty interesting that Tellez is like crushing the ball right now, and he was really good in the first half of last year too. So I get it, but also when I just look at the way the roster is breaking down right now, it just seems like you're asking for the oldest, slowest, least versatile bench in baseball. And when it comes to the bench, I know a lot of people don't care about that. You should. You should. You want, where are the 2015 Royals without Gerard Dyson coming off the bench? It's just one of those things like you're going to take out Cal Raleigh to pinch run, and you're going to pinch run Mitch Haniger? Like, no, it's just one of those things where Tellez just doesn't do enough to make the roster. But if Luke Raley gets hurt, yes. If Mitch Haniger, is DFA'd or whatever, they actually do the right thing and they move on there. I would still prefer like a Dom Canzone because at least he can run. I mean, he runs like a baby giraffe, but at least he can run a little bit. But if it's Tellez, that's fine. I could wrap my head around that. But if Haniger's here, Tellez cannot be. I just don't see any way that makes sense.
Yeah, with to Colby's point, like if Mitch Haniger's off the roster, it can make some sense. But with Mitch on the roster, just too many zero base running, zero defenders on the bench. Tellez to me would be perfect. One, Haniger's got to be off the roster. Number two, like back in the NL days when pitchers hit, yeah, a guy that can run into it, pinch hit for a pitcher in the sixth inning, totally fine with it. I don't mind having a bat only guy on the bench as just strictly a pinch hitter. But with with some of the, roster stuff and everything, it just, I don't see it. Cause like I said, you got Garver on the bench who is going to be backup catcher, but then DH, you're going to probably have Haniger who's DH and outfield, so it's just, I don't see the fit. I wouldn't mind it. I like having a left-handed hitting bat to kind of come in, like, to pinch hit for
Mike
Dylan
Ford.
Moore against a righty. Hey, yeah, he could just run into one for you. I wouldn't mind Mike Ford on this team, but and go from there. It's totally fine. Like I'd rather have Rowdy Tellez up in the bottom of the ninth, down 3-2, because again, like he's not a very good hitter, honestly, but he can run into one, and that's what you're looking for in that spot. I just don't see it though. To Colby's point, with the roster and with Haniger on there, and I don't see them moving on from that. Because of his point about ownership and being cheap, so I don't see them moving on from Haniger, and I don't think you can keep both of them. There's just not enough. There's too many no base running, no defenders on the roster, and you just can't have that many. You need some guys that can pinch run and play the field a little bit for substitutions.
Yeah, I mean,
Jake,
I agree with what everyone said. My analysis for Rowdy Tellez goes as far as I would like this roster to have some chunky boy representation on it, and I would feel a lot more seen if he was on the roster. Thank you very much, Jerry DePoto.
Representation matters.
It does.
I'm gonna buy you a Rowdy Tellez Mariner jersey.
I will wear it with pride.
I'm gonna buy you one.
Yeah, I don't care if it's DH Gate or whatever. A nice like Sunday cream Rowdy Tellez. I will rock that with no shame at all.
It'll be a shirt.
Can't do the Sunday cream though. There's no name on the back. People aren't going to know that's what
I guess that's true. I guess that's true. Okay,
Yeah.
well, whatever. I'll settle with whatever. But yeah, I just, I it would be cool to have like a Mike Ford type a little bit, and Rowdy could be that guy. But I don't feel, other than making me feel better internally, I don't really care too much. Regardless, he's a bench piece, so it's not make or break in me. I think he would be a very fun player to root for, and it would be great in that regard. But I can't go by who would be the most fun to root for. I have to go with who is going to make the team better, because ultimately I'd rather root for a good team than personalities at the end of the day. It's certainly a plus, but yeah.
All right, I'm curious because are we saying, I'm not gonna say we because definitely not me, I already know what I'm saying, but are we somehow coming to this agreement that Rowdy Tellez is someone that you would not choose over Haniger.
I'm not saying that. I think everyone should be somewhat in agreement that like Haniger's time should probably be done.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's ultimately not up to me for when that time happens. If it were up to me, it would have happened already. We wouldn't have signed him back from the Giants in the first place. Let's be real.
You guys are the GM in this
know,
situation. Are we choosing Rowdy or are we choosing?
Oh, I mean, I'm
Mitch?
choosing Rowdy just because I can get that guy who may hit a do a Ford versus Bautista kind of thing. Just hit one out for me. That's fine. Well, it's a little hard, I guess, because I feel like Haniger does kind of have a bit of the clutch factor, even if he's not great with the bat. If it's a big situation, maybe he'll come through. But that's ultimately like vibes based. Still, there's no analytics to tell me how true that is or not. But yeah, I would prefer Tellez to Chemtrail Haniger, but if we're gonna get Chemtrail Haniger regardless, and you know what, it is what it is. I just there's nothing else I could say about it. I guess I would really love to root for Rowdy Tellez on opening day. I would love to see him waddle in from the outfield in the big ceremony. That would be such a vibe. I don't think I'm gonna get that moment though, unfortunately. But if I do, I'm gonna leave that trip happy. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
My answer would be neither of them. I'd rather have Canzone. I'd rather
My
have
answer would be
Rivas.
Pete Alonso.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would-
could you
I would
not
keep
find a way to
Tellez
get Bryce
just-
Harper on this roster? I'm just asking questions here.
Well,
Yeah.
he just tattooed himself with Philly, the Philly mascot. So
Did he?
I don't think he's leaving. Yeah, he just
That's
did
a
a
bad
whole tattoo of it.
That's a bad tattoo.
Well, I mean,
That banana bread
don't-
giveaway would have been so fire though.
oh yeah, that's true. Jay, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I would keep Tellez just for Jake. You said put on the GM hat.
I know.
So I would
Thank
do
you.
that for him.
Yeah.
I'll play devil's advocate. Mitch Haniger has been over his career a better hitter than Rowdy Tellez. So like if Mitch Haniger just can actually somewhat be average against lefties this year, I don't want either. I'm actually with Colby. I'd prefer neither. They both kind of suck. But like it's not crazy that Mitch Haniger is a better hitter than Rowdy Tellez. Like just as much as we're enamored with Rowdy right now, like Mitch could easily be the better hitter, but they both don't do anything besides hit, and they both aren't very good at it anymore. So I don't know.
I feel like Rowdy has a better chance of bouncing back. I'm gonna hop on the bandwagon with him. I'm not saying that he deserves to be a starter or anything like that, but I would much rather have him over Haniger. I feel like the ice cold last few years of Haniger has kind of done it for me, and I think that you guys agree. We were just reiterating that, but at that point, if we're just looking for a bat to be on the bench, like a bat that we can maybe be dependent on, and I feel like Rowdy has kind of been surrounded by, like, he made his name with the Brewers. I think that people knew who he was because of his time with the Brewers. Then he goes to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is not exactly the organization I think you'd want to be a part of, especially if you want to win. Like, it's just not going to happen. Whereas now he's now with a team that has been in playoff talks the last few years. And if he can get on that team and he can really produce and prove himself to get him a big contract, maybe somewhere else, or, he's kind of in that prove it moment now, he can fill that spot and improve and be part of a team that's a little bit more electric, and the fan base is probably a little bit more electric than Pittsburgh. I mean, nothing against the Pirates or anything like that, but let's be honest, like, when was the last time they even made it to the playoffs that was like, oh shit, they might go to the World Series? I don't remember the last time we discussed that at all. So
2015.
Yeah,
15,
whenever they
yeah,
played
15.
the Reds and had the Cueto
McCutcheon?
game,
That was a
yeah,
great Cueto game. That was a great game. It was like
Okay,
Marte
so
and McCutcheon.
we're talking 10
But yeah.
years at least.
Yeah.
it's
yeah,
been a
so-
while. Yeah,
So I mean, I'm not saying, and I know you mentioned that, like, oh, he's terrible defensively and he's not fast. I get that, but as far as hitting wise, like finding his groove to hit, that's what Victor Robles pretty much did when he came to Seattle last season. So I could see him as maybe being that nobody expected guy with the power that he has to just put the bat on the ball and hit home runs and just be that guy, because who knows about Garver? Maybe this is his year to bounce back, but I also worry about Polanco. We haven't really seen him much, and he's still recovering from his surgery, and what if it gets re-aggravated in some reason? And now you're either putting Moore, or you're putting Solano, or you're putting somebody else at third. That does open a spot in the lineup somewhere. So
yeah.
I'm for Rowdy. I'm rooting for him to do good, but I also understand where you guys are coming from. But in comparison to the guys we have on our bench now, like, I'm more of a fan of Rowdy just being this, like, where the hell did he come from guy, and support this team. I mean, and luckily he was a minor league contract. Yeah. So
yeah, I think the ideal thing would be is that you can stash him in AAA, and then you give Garver and you give these other guys at bats for a while. And we don't know if he has opt out at the end of spring training. We don't know if the opt out is May 1st. A lot of the times it's June 15th. So we don't really know the details of his minor league deal, and the opt out date can kind of move around. But if he's willing to go to AAA, yeah, you absolutely would like to stash a bat like that for a couple months at least, because Mike Ford did come up and he did stabilize a couple of different times for this Mariner team and had some big hits. So there's definitely value in a guy like that. You just want to, make sure that he fits, and I don't think he's going to fit entering opening day, but he could fit. Again, if only like 2 or 3 things happen, he makes a ton of sense. So I think you want to stash him, and I think you hope that he wants to stick around for that opportunity. But, as things stand right now, I think if he's on the opening day roster, something terrible has happened, or something really good. They DFA'd Haniger. Nothing in between.
hope. I know there's plenty of Haniger fans out there that are going to hate this, but it's
I love
just like,
Mitch.
I'm so over it.
We all love Mitch. Yeah, I'm a huge Haniger fan, but
put him in the Mariners Hall of Fame, let him have his moment, and all that stuff. But he's not good.
Give him
he's
the
cooked.
number, do the
do whatever, I don't
replays.
care.
Cool.
Yep.
Let's move on.
He's cooked.
Any final thoughts, guys, before we put an end to it?
If Rowdy makes the opening day roster and that dude hits a bomb at opening day with me in attendance, I will turn into a Philly sports fan. I'll be climbing the light poles as soon as, even if we lose, I don't care. I will be celebrating like we just won the World Series. So that's my last thing.
I'm going to hold that. I'm holding you to it. Yeah. You got to climb a light pole now.
Okay. You got it.
All right. Jay?
A's win 13-1, but we got that Rowdy Tellez solo home run the bottom of the ninth.
Yeah. Heck yeah, we did.
That's right.
Colby?
Well, I mean, I don't know when this is coming out, but as we're recording it, 19 days till opening day.
Oh, yeah. Well, this will be going up on Monday. We're recording on Saturday, so because now I have to do some editing because Colby's internet sucks. So
17 days till opening day.
17 days till opening day. Well, with that, I appreciate you guys coming on. Please go down in the description. Everybody check out their channel, subscribe to them, leave a comment down what you guys think of this whole entire conversation. I typically reply to it, and we can also recirculate that in the next Mariner Monday. So we'll see who comes back next week, but I appreciate you guys all coming on, and hell, go Mariners.